Our third exemplar for week 1 of the course Transmission of the Light is Ananda. Ananda was the Buddha's attendant. And his story, according to this, goes that he asked Mahakashapa, what did the Buddha hand on to you besides the golden sleeved robe? Kashyapa calls out, Ananda! Ananda says, yes. Kashyapa said, take down the banner pole in front of the gate. And Ananda was greatly enlightened. So the early texts and the Zen texts agree that Ananda was not awakened at the time of the Buddha's death, even though he had been the Buddha's attendant for more than 2 decades and had what was said to be a perfect memory and was able to recite word by word what the Buddha had taught. So there is this explanation here within Zen of how Ananda's awakening happened. So this question from Ananda, did the Buddha give you something other than the robe? In a way, it is some kind of doubt. Doubt about his own ability to wake up. Maybe I didn't get the secret password or the secret handshake or the decoder ring. Maybe there's some special esoteric practice that I haven't mastered, that I haven't learned. I imagine all of that behind Ananda's question to Kashyapa. What's missing? And Kashyapa responds, rather than trying to dispel this idea directly, or let me say it this way. Kashyapa responds rather than trying to explain, but by showing Ananda directly. So he calls his name, Ananda, and Ananda responds. And this is a very, very common way of practice. This is a very common style of teaching. We see this over and over again by various Zen teachers in various forms. But this way of calling someone and they respond. And that principle of response is a pointer at the workings of Buddha nature. So Ananda responds. He says, according to Cleary, he says yes. He says something, some kind of response. And Kashyapa replies, take down the banner pole. So Keizan Zenji was kind enough to tell us in his comments, and something that has also been recorded elsewhere, that the banner pole stands for a debate. Stands for the Dharma debate. So to take down the banner pole, Kashyapa is asking Ananda, drop your views. Set down all your views. Set down any idea of 2 sides. Set down all of that. And in that moment, Ananda gets it. He's able to drop it all off, to take down the banner pole. So looking a little bit more at the chapter, the main point of this chapter is that great learning will not awaken you. No matter how bright you are, or what a good understanding you have, no matter what kind of perfect memory you might have, no matter how many teachings you may have heard and learned and recited, none of that is a substitute for the lived, embodied experience. It's not to say that it's not a support, that it's not helpful. It certainly is. Otherwise, Keizan would not have given us a book to tell us about it. But it doesn't substitute. It's not the same thing. Intellectual understanding is not the same thing as the realization of awakening. And I think most of us intuitively get that. So there's a little bit of the story here of the first council and the recitation of the Buddhist teachings, and Ananda as having been the vessel for that. He was the reciter of the suttas specifically. Upali was the reciter of the Vinaya, as it's recorded in other places. That's why when we see suttas, they begin with this phrase, "Thus have I heard." That's Ananda speaking, saying, "Thus have I heard. The Buddha was here, the Buddha was there, and he said this, or he said that, or this disciple said this, or said that, or this person approached and asked this question." That's Ananda telling those stories. So he begins each time with, "Thus have I heard." And it was carried, right, verbally. So others would have also start by saying, "Thus have I heard," and they heard it from somebody who heard it from who originally heard it from Ananda. That's the idea. So that's also a reference to a form of verbal transmission that was happening. So there's a contrast here that Keizan makes on page 9 of the Cleary translation toward the bottom. Ananda was fond of intellectual learning, and that's why he had not yet truly realized enlightenment, meaning that he was relying too much on his intellect, on his concepts. Shakyamuni, on the other hand, cultivated energy whereby he attained true enlightenment. So again, a very strong exhortation to make effort, persevere, apply yourself. Even if you know the teachings well, you have to apply yourself. And then Keizan lays it on us on the top of page 10. "Yet I dare say," says Keizan, "there must be something besides giving the robe." So there's then some discussion about the preciousness of robes. And the reason for this, I believe, there are reasons of, authority and authenticity that are involved there. But part of what I think that Keizan greatly valued, and that he is sort of subtly sharing here throughout this text of Denko-roku, is the question also of trust. We can understand transmission and succession as a matter of trust. Trust between individuals that this person, this next person in the lineage, understands themselves as the Dhamma, enough to carry it forward. And any robe, this is my small version. It's called Raksu, small version of my Dharma transmission robe. it's brown. That's how you know that it's one of my Dharma transmission robes. And it represents a trust that has been put in me, but also that I was able to meet. And when that form of meeting happens, then we say there is hand-to-hand transmission. So there is also this way in which Keizan is speaking about the trust between individuals, between teachers and students. How does that trust develop? How does it show up? How does it lead to this mutual understanding where there is eventually a full meeting? So he talks a bit about the robes. And at the bottom of page 10 of the Cleary translation, Keizan says, the truth was not transmitted to two people, only one person. Kashyapa received the Buddha's bequest. And then Ananda attended Kashyapa for 20 years and held the transmission of the teaching. So the Zen school should be known as special. So again, as I said in my introductory remarks, that's not historically the case. We know that many people were considered the successors of the Buddha and the successors of Kashyapa and the successors of other of the Buddha's great disciples and Ananda and so on. It's very rare, actually, that there was only one successor to any great teacher, female or male, or of whatever gender. So to be sure, on page 11, the second full paragraph toward the bottom, Keizan reminds us, it is not that the heart of the matter, the heart, the kernel of the teaching, the importance of the teaching, the heart of the teaching is not in the scriptural teachings, but that Ananda had not yet penetrated it. So what he's saying is that the teachings are pointing at reality. They are wisdom. But that wisdom, again, we have to make it our own. We have to see ourselves as that thing. We have to penetrate it, as Keizan is saying. And then he uses this beautiful metaphor. You should know that the way of enlightenment is not easy. You should know that Ananda attended on Kashyapa, so he had this experience with Kashyapa, again, according to this textual understanding of this lineage. Ananda had this experience of studying with Kashyapa. And then again, he propagated the true teachings, the teachings of wisdom, Ananda did, after his great enlightenment. It was like fire joining fire. It was like fire joining fire. It's beautiful. So when Ananda awakens, when Ananda has his experience of his own Buddha nature, it's like fire joining fire. It's like this sense of complete immersion in the things, the principles, the reality that you have always been integral to. And it is like Ananda and Kashyapa, fire joining fire. And then he teaches that true Dhamma. He teaches that same wisdom that he knew intellectually, but now he has fully, viscerally experienced. And again, it's like fire joining fire. It's like, the mind and the embodied, deep, unconditioned experience joining together. So at the top of page 12 in the Cleary translation, although Kashyapa called Ananda, he was not calling Ananda. And Ananda did not echo in reply, meaning that Kashyapa was trying to elicit the activity of response. That activity of response is showing the principles at work. So it wasn't about the specific person named Ananda. It's about Ananda as the principles themselves that respond to phenomena. And here is where Kazan tells us a little bit about what the banner pole meant. So he also says, don't think that Kashyapa and Ananda are both banner poles. That's not the way to think about it. It's Ananda's own banner pole that he needs to take down. And then when he does that, then, as Kazan says, a new banner pole springs up, meaning the wisdom, the complete wisdom of enlightenment springs up rather than the old deluded view that was standing in the way. So Kazan reminds us, Ananda was greatly enlightened because he realized the communion of the paths of teacher and apprentice. Let's see how Cook translated that line, because that's a very important line. When Kashyapa instructed him to knock down the flagpole or the banner pole, Ananda was greatly awakened because master and disciple had become one in the way or within the way. Again and again and again, pointing at non-separation, non-duality. But don't get stuck in purity. Go further and understand the existence of the echo. So there is the roar and there is the echo. Wisteria withered, trees fallen. So this is Cook's translation of the poem for Venerable Ananda, the verse. Wisteria withered, trees fallen, mountains crumbled. Everything falls away. Everything. And, not even an and, right? Valley streams gush forth and sparks pour out. The creative expression that is this human being. Like fire, joining with fire.